So I think everyone's here. Andy, do you have ice cream again?
I don't. Not this time.
Not this time. Okay. Well, either way, we're here today to talk set 7. So let's do it. Hey, everyone. My name is Noah Barnett. I'm the founder of Purple Shadow Gaming. And tonight I have the pleasure of having Justin, John, and Andy back to do an additional set 7 review. But instead of reviewing the whole set, we are going to dive deep into one specific ink combination. And tonight that ink combination is going to be Sapphire Steel. We were so grateful for all the positive feedback. Last episode, we had hundreds and hundreds of views of the video, which I did not expect, to be honest. Maybe I had low expectations, but just so grateful. We got comments, people asking us questions, etc. Super grateful. So we decided to get the gang back together and try it again. This time diving deep into Sapphire Steel. While I'm getting everything set up on my side, Justin, John, Andy, how has your week's been? What's going on in your Lorcana life right now? Justin?
Lorcana has been my escape from very stressful work over the last few weeks, so it has been my savior.
Fair enough. John?
I've been having a lot of fun testing. I've been throwing together as many weird lists as I can to see if there's anything that just sticks that might be better than it looks on the surface.
Yeah, I love that. You're like our tinkerer in the group. Every time I'm like, I wonder if this is going to work, you've probably already tried it, so I'm just going to ask you.
What do you think about this card?
Andy, what about you? Have you been digging in on set 7 at all?
Mainly been just observing a lot of people, but it's been fun to watch people play and test. There's several Discords I'm in that are always on tabletop or just using proxies, and it's been fun.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see the diversity of people trying different things and not even believing that they are good. It's not like, oh, I think this 60 is good. It's just like, oh, these cards combined together feel interesting. So let's see what happens. I was even watching 2 players tonight play set 7 cards for the first time. And it was like, wait, what does Tamatoa do? Like, I can tap this and I can put an item into play for free. Like, that seems insane, type thing. So it's cool to see people's first interactions with some of these set 7 cards. And speaking of Tamatoa, we're definitely going to dive in and talk about Tamatoa on today's episode. So we're going to dig into Archazia's island. Justin, did you get any feedback on how to say this from smarter people than us?
No, but I'm going to look it up now.
Okay, we've assigned tasks out to Justin. Justin's going to get us straight on this. Archazia's Island set 7 meta. One deck that the internet is raving about is the Sapphire Steel deck, and how there's beliefs that this might be a tier S deck. Which, to be honest, I know some people would disagree, including Lamb Chops, who was on Quest Like a Pro recently. It really hasn't been a top tier deck the past few sets. It's been around, there's been some good players there, but people are really hyped about this deck being a S tier deck going into set 7. What do we think? John?
I think it's probably one of the most consistent lists that we're going to find. You can build it about 5 different ways, and all of them are consistent. So just the fact that it is consistent is going to make it see a lot of play.
Yeah. Andy, what's your take? I know you're not a Sapphire Steel connoisseur, but yeah, what do you think about this deck? Can it make it up there with Ruby Sapphire and Steel Amethyst and Amber Steel, the other decks?
I think it got a lot of tools this set that it can contend with other decks. I think it's going to be more aggro variant. I think a lot of the people are on the Kiwi version, and I love the new bell. Destroy an item, play it for free. So it's like a Cinderella that people are talking about. And I think that's going to help it push it over the edge.
Justin, I know you've also admittedly not been a Sapphire-esque player, but what's your take on this deck? Really combining, I think, one of the better colors, Sapphire, and the other better color, Steel. It's like the 2 best colors being put together. It has to be good, right?
I'm hopeful for a more aggressive version. That's like my style of play, and I do like some of the cards in there. If we can get something to support Alice, that would be nice, because she's terrible on the draw. That would be my preferences if we can see that breakthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are an array of versions floating around the internet, and I think we're going to share 4 or 5 different versions of this deck. But before we do that, we want to talk about the newcomers, because there really are these 2 primary newcomers that have come in set 7 that have kind of, I think, reinvigorated excitement about Sapphire Steel. And that's Belle, Apprentice Inventor, and Tamatoa, Happy as a Clam. And for those only listening to this, I just want to remind those listening what these cards do. So Belle is a 3-drop inkable 3/3, but during your turn, you may banish chosen item of yours to play this character for free, and she quests for 1. So you can basically play this, you play Popsicle, you draw a card, you banish Popsicle, you play Belle. Incredible power. Playing things for free is really interesting. The other one is a 6-drop inkable Tamatoa, Happy as a Clam, who's a 4/5. When you play Tamatoa, you get to return up to 2 item cards from your discard to your hand. And whenever this character quests, you may play an item for free, and it quests for 2. These cards have been buzzing around the internet, so we're not the first people to talk about them. But why have these 2 cards specifically pushed this deck over the edge? Andy?
Well, I mentioned Belle earlier. People call it the Blue Cinderella because you play it on turn. You can, if you have the combo piece, an item on turn 1, you can play it and then sing all of your 3-cost songs, just like a Steel Song does, or the DDH deck. Strength, let the Storm Rage on. So yeah, I think that power, that early control can help this deck succeed. So that you can get to Tamatoa, Happy as a Clam, so you can return those items that you did banish, refill your hand, and just it's a big body, big threat, because of the questing power with ability, which is you may play a dime for free the following turn, and that's like a huge swing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the idea of being able to play things for free here, free is in both of these cards, card text. Play this character for free or play another card for free. In the case of Tamatoa, that's an item. That's really powerful. Playing things for free. There's also another card I didn't put on here, but Scrooge, you can tap 4 items and play Scrooge for free. This idea of free is a really interesting introduction that I think will shape it and why these cards are surfacing to the top. John, what is your take on these 2 cards? Why are these 2 cards the difference maker to maybe push this into S tier?
I think you really got to look at it from the idea of card advantage. At the end of the day, you're trying to make it so your cards trade in a 2-for-1 value or better into what your opponent's playing. You want to trade 1 piece of your cardboard for 2 pieces of their cardboard, and that's how you're going to win in the long stretch. Now, Tamatoa does that by giving you 3 pieces for the cost of 1. Belle feeds that 3 pieces for the cost of 1. The fact that they both feed off each other and generate card value throughout the length of a game is what's going to push this over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Justin, you're someone who sings songs and does other things like that in your play style. And so, yeah, what's your take on Belle being a singer? Because to me, Belle initially stood out as like, okay, I can defend off aggro early with Belle. And I wasn't thinking about songs, but do you think she's really going to be an effective singer?
I don't think that, I'm still not a believer that Storm is right in the deck just because you have something that can sing on turn 2. I think you want to be doing other things, and I don't think I'm not sure, but isn't the deck kind of a little strained on Inkables as it is already? And then I don't think you want to sing strengths that early either. So I see it more as just keeping people from questing and losing to bad trades with her. So if I'm thinking, all of those initial 1-drops that hit the board, outside of maybe Daisy, you're keeping those from questing, those 1, 2, 3 extra lore that you might otherwise get that would have made the difference between getting to 17 and getting to 20. That's how I see her being most impactful.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, because as a Sapphire player, you tend to be in a place where you need just like 3 extra lore. And if you can hold off 3 extra lore with a Belle, like that can be really impactful. Whereas the Ruby Sapphire decks have gotten around it with something like a Pirate's Life to be able to recover those lore back. Because if I can make my opponent have to get to 23, 24, like a Pirate's Life does, that's super helpful. But again, this does similar things. So I'm with you, Justin. I think she's going to be a better defensive play versus an actual aggressive play with the songs. But we'll have to really see. And I think that leads us into like the complements of what these cards are joining, because there's an array of things that are kind of staples across all the versions. I mentioned at the top of the call that there's probably 4 or 5 different builds of Sapphire Steel floating around, and there has kind of been that for the past few sets. But at the core of these, this is the gang. You know, there's Popsicle, Fortisphere, Hiram Flaversham, Pete, and Mr. Smee. And I think these cards together cannot be ignored. You're like, I get to play all of these in the same deck. It's really pretty incredible. And I think now when you think about adding Tamatoa to that mix, who already, even Discount Bell, synergizes with Hiram, like that's pretty incredible. And then obviously Pete and Mr. Smee, you know, just being incredible characters. I think that's what's making these decks actually somewhat interesting. So what I want to do next and kind of mix it up a little bit, because I don't think I prepared John, Andy, or Justin to do this, but I want to share the different versions. So we're going to share really the 4 different versions, and they're all built off of a draw engine, which I actually think is interesting, is that drawing cards in this game is so important that the different versions of Sapphire Steel are all anchored to a different draw engine to complement Hiram. The draw versions of this deck are A Whole New World, Doc, and Oswald. Obviously, they're very different cards, but the different versions of Sapphire Steel really build around each of these in different ways. And so A Whole New World, John, I'm going to let you take this one. What is the Whole New World deck? Why is it different? Why is A Whole New World? You got to advocate for A Whole New World. You got to represent the Whole New World team, because RMB and the crew that want Whole New World to work still in Sapphire Steel are out there for you. So John, why is Whole New World the right choice?
Whole New World's a great choice in this because it allows you to dump your hand. The idea with running like a blue song style deck, you can run up to Tinkerbell with Cogsworth, and just with that new bell, it enables this more song style deck. You dump your hand, you eliminate your opponent's board completely, you just wipe it out, and then you drop Whole New World while you have no cards. They have 3 or 4 left. You get to use Whole New World almost as an aggressive tool within that build, which I still like. You're again, we're back to the number of cardboard. You're trading 1 for their 3 or 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And then new Tamatoa comes back and was like, I can pick up some of those items I dropped in, whether it was Dime or one a Popsicle that I didn't get to play, a Fortisphere. So yeah, Whole New World's definitely kind of the go-to. And honestly, I think in set 6, the Whole New World version was really shining. There was another version that was shiny towards the end of set 6 that I think is going to be pulled into the set 7 meta, and that's using Doc. And so, Justin, I know you use Doc a lot in your Purple Steel deck, but how can Doc really help Sapphire Steel, and why is that differentiated maybe from the other options like Whole New World or Oswald?
I think you need to be looking to go faster when you're playing Doc, and it's not really that you inherently play faster, because what you need to be doing is playing lower cost stuff so that you can get to a point where Doc is effectively the only card in your hand. And when you're playing some of the bigger versions of Sapphire Steel, you're just never going to get to the point where you have no cards in hand. So that is the challenge, I think, with Sapphire Steel, is there's not a lot of 1-drops that are really great that can help you get to empty your hand. But if we can figure out like an item, somewhat of a deck that works around items where you're not too top heavy, I do like the idea of like being able to play Doc with, like, say, Popsicle in hand. You intentionally throw the Doc into your discard, and then you're hoping for Tamatoa off the top. But it doesn't feel as bad when you can get 2 items back with the Tamatoa. So I know there's probably not a build out there like that right now, but just thinking about that synergy, that possible synergy, if we can make it work, sounds pretty tantalizing. But it's way different than the Whole New World, right? Where you're trying to go big, you're trying to ink a lot, you're trying to play more stuff than your opponent can, but bigger. So quite a bit different, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And I think the dock slots very nicely into what I think Harlan's suite called Kiwi. There was another person that co-built the deck with him, but I can't recall his name. Does anyone know who the other person was?
I don't.
No.
Yeah.
So it was Harlan. I think it was like Jack something. Either way, I think what they ended up doing was really building like a diggy diggy hole deck, but with Sapphire instead of Amber, or even similar to the purple steel deck, where you're using docks as synergy to basically go wide and then have a long game over time. And I think that's still a version here. And I actually think what's interesting is that version is the one that I think is least dependent on some of the newer cards. So it'll be interesting to see how that still kind of like presses forward into the meta. The last one we have
Shadows, by the way.
Jack Shadows. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
Big call out. I think Harlan always says that Jack Shadows is the one that actually made the deck. Harlan was just the one that's kind of championed it in the Lorcana community. So thank you for bringing Kiwi to the table. But yeah, Doc definitely slots into that. That's partnering with Alice and a few other things. So it should be interesting to see. We're going to share some of these deck lists in just a minute and actually dive deep into them. But before you do, I want to talk about Oswald. Andy, can the rabbit make it happen?
I don't know. Maybe this is the set. There's more items. Tamatoa can get back those items. But I feel like Oswald is a very like high roll type of style deck. If you hit the dime, hit a quill, you can definitely accelerate really quickly and then start drawing off like with other item cards like Maurice. If you're playing them for free, you're just paying one, and with Quill on board, you're just like drawing a bunch and hopefully getting your removals, your aerials, and just literally just keeping aerial early game on turn 6 with a dime in play early. You can just win the game without doing nothing.
Yeah, it is cool to see Oswald pop off. Like if you look at board states sometimes and there's like 12 items in play because of Oswald, it's like pretty cool. It's kind of annoying because you're like taking up your opponent's play mat and stuff. But I want Oswald to work. I think the one thing I would almost disagree with a little bit, Andy, is you said we got more items. Like what items did we get to help support Oswald? I think we got Bell and Tamatoa, but I don't know about any items that are good in set 7.
I guess that's true. I guess bringing back like Maurice and stuff like that, I guess, is
That's fair.
key because of Tamatoa, the baby Tama.
Yeah,
he's just your like draw and just like your gas for item decks.
I mean, not to put too fine of a point on it, but Sapphire Coil is this set.
But is that right for Sapphire Steel though?
I missed that one.
I don't think it works in Sapphire Steel.
It doesn't.
I don't know. I think there's a build out there with Oswald where you've got a Chromicon, you've got the Steel Chromicon, you've got the Force Sphere, you got the Coil, you got the Popsicle, you got Quill, and you're able to play kind of a long game where you're slowly picking away your opponent's board. You're not necessarily relying on Oswald as a high roll, but more like a late game, you're inking one, getting a card here and there type deal.
Okay.
That's fair. Well, I do have a mystery 4th option, which is already showing my bias, which we'll talk about at the end of today's episode. But I do think there's a 4th option to all of these 3. But let's actually dig into the decks and kind of dialogue on this. So R&B, famously known as one of the champions of Sapphire Steel. He's part of Team Maelstrom in partnership with Sailor. Call out to Sailor. Listen to his interview on Quest Like a Pro, where you learn how to quest like Sailor. Definitely check out that episode. But R&B is just known to champion this deck. He's obviously been a huge fan of Whole New World. So this is the first list we're going to look at, which is a Whole New World list. What do we think about this latest list from R&B? Justin, anything stand out to you initially as you're looking at kind of the dynamic of this build?
Hades stands out because that hasn't traditionally been in Blue Steel. So I played Blue Steel for a little while back, I think in like set 4, maybe somewhere around there. The Twin Fire seems to work really well with the discarding the items, kind of like what I was alluding to with Doc.
Yeah.
So that seems pretty nice. I'm actually And even though not being a blue player, Tamatoa, the 6-drop, if that wasn't already obvious that it's in here, I'm most excited to play that. I'm not even actually sure that you really have to have the 8-drop Tamatoa, but that's not my expertise, so I'm curious.
Yeah. No, that is true. You start looking at the dynamic of this deck and you're like, well, there's a lot of different things going on. You know, you have the big Tamatoa, you have the new Tamatoa, you have Aerial, you have Bell, you have Dimes, you have Let It Goes, you have Whole New Worlds. There's just a lot going on in this, almost like a toolbox deck. John?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get at. It's definitely just basically a straight up toolbox. The only thing that I don't like about it is the Aerial. I'd rather just get up to a Tamatoa, Dime, and call it game. And there's a lot of tools to get there, and you'll gain lore as you go. Looking at lists, looking at the number of unequals in list, it feels like Aerial's going to get stuck in your hand a lot in this list and might lose you a game or two.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. And honestly, if you did that, you might be able to play Sail instead of Tipo because your uninkables are low enough if you remove Aerials to be able to have that. And I think I still think as a Sapphire player, Sail is sometimes better into other Sapphire decks.
I'm not sold that you ever take Tipo out of one of these lists, or this list particularly, because so much of the format has 3 health. You want to be able to have things in range, and Tipo will help you get them in range. Your removal is based off of the total damage instead of like the red-blue, where it's just based off it existing.
Yeah, and so what you're really referring to is using Tipo as almost like a mitigation tool so that you can either get them in range for grab your swords or even Tinkerbell later or Twin Fire, etc. I'd never thought about that. That's actually really interesting.
I disagree. I like Aerial. You really only have to get to 10. And, you know, play Tamatoa, right? And you can then quest, put the dime down for free, and the next turn is game. So that's what I like about it a lot. And I suspect there's going to be fewer Be Prepareds out there. So it can sit there and be fine.
Yeah. And even the other thing you can do against red blue to even put a finer point on this, Justin, is if you just play Aerial and Defeat, and then you play Dime next turn, the game's like you can get 10 no matter what. There's no way around Pete Aerial, I don't believe. And so it's really good into some of the not mirror matches, but like the Sapphire matches that you're definitely going to run into.
The only thing that we play around is the only thing I can take that out if it's only Aerial P is Tremaine into Shift Tremaine. Not a lot of people are playing Tremaine right now, so maybe that helps. But I actually agree with Justin. I think Aerial. I want more Aerials. I want 3 minimum. I think it's so good, especially for predicting Coil to be part of the meta with red blue. We're gonna play a lot of red blue this meta as a blue steel, so I want more Aerials. Yeah, and the deck, I feel like it's doing too much. I'm a guy that wants consistency. I want 4-ofs. I think it's trying to do too much. I don't agree with the Bell in this list because there's no songs. And I say that because you pop your popsicle after turn 1, and yes, it does deal with aggro, but it also makes your turn 3 play worse just because you TPO on 2, you ramp into 3, and you want to usually get those cards back that you hand fix with TPO, and then you lost the card because you played Bell, so you're at 4. You want to start drawing or ramping, and if you do Quill, you're going to start, like, your hand size is going to reduce, and you also don't have an item for her on to pop. So then you have to find that other item. If you don't find it, it can be pretty rough for you.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And honestly, again, as a Sapphire player, like, I've played Bell and like I almost lost a game. I ended up winning because I think my opponent just drew dead the other day. But because I played Bell early, I never drew a second item, even though you shouldn't have that happen. But it was just like this weird situation where like I drew into uninkables. I didn't have a second item to get Hiram off to like regroup my hand. And so it just ended up being awkward. I think that's why I would even push back again on Tipo to be like, it's also a negative card advantage card, and at least initially in like the beginning of the games. in addition to Bell, you also have Quills, which is negative. So you have like Quill, Bell, and Tipo that are all kind of like taking away from you. And how do you really need to regroup back? I guess you're playing Holy World. And
that's what I was about to point out.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the deck's built around, is the negative card advantage while gaining presence on the board and presence in your inkwell, and then whole new worlding out of it just by playing out your cards faster, by emptying your hand faster.
Yeah.
That's by design.
Yeah. Card I feel like is missing in this list is Tala. I feel like what else are you playing on 3 on this list and feel good about? Like, what do you want to be playing with 4 ink? If it's a ROM, you need that item. You don't have that item, you lose a turn, and you don't want to do that in Lorcana. One loss of a turn can be a big swing for your opponent.
What'd you take out to put that in?
Another negative card advantage card that's in here is Twin Fire. I would probably take that out. I love Tipo. I think Tipo's better than Cell by far, mainly because it's good hand fixing. It deals with the 2 questers early game, the 1-drops, Merfolk, Lilo, Maleficent, that we want to destroy. Tipo takes 2 of them out. The only one it doesn't die to, but it doesn't take out is Daisy. And now I guess Lady. I think it's a 1/2. Cool. I think I would just take out the Twin Fire just because you're already losing so much card advantage. So many cards because of the other cards you play.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The thing I would push back on a little bit about Tala in this deck, and maybe again, John, this kind of reiterates your point about Whole New World as well, is like you're probably more often than not actually going 2/4. You might be going like 2/3, or even like if you get to 4, you still end up choosing to play Quill into Smee, or Quill into like Twin Fire, or Quill into Visions. Or Visions isn't even in this deck. Where is Visions? Visions is the best card. Why is that not here? Now I'm like super distracted that Visions is not in this deck. I love that card so much. But I guess you have Whole New World. I just like Visions over Whole New World. But I digress. But yeah, I actually think you go like, even if you ramp on 2, you actually tend to not play a 4-drop. You tend to play like a Quill.
3 then.
I think the ideal turn 3 is Fishbone Quill ramp again so that you have a turn 4 Tinkerbell. I think that's your ideal line.
Or you don't actually ramp on 2, you play like Smee, Quill, Tinkerbell, which is like the old deck, which is like if you could play Smee, Quill, Tinkerbell, like that's just so good. So, and in this case, you can actually play like Bell, Smee, Quill, Tamatoa even, and maybe you get 1 card back or something like that. Like there's other lines here that I think are interesting.
You can kind of look at the 4-ups in the deck and determine the opening lines. There's basically 3 opening lines built in, just looking at the 4-ups in the list. So you're just choosing one from the get-go with your hand and going with it. You just have to base it around what your opponent's playing. Hopefully you're in a 3-game format and you get to make that choice twice.
Fair enough. Well, let's shift gears and go to like a list that I feel like is almost the complete opposite of this list, which is the more aggro or Kiwi deck. Jack Sparrow's Harlan Sweet kind of built this deck. Honestly, there's not much different about this deck than the previous deck. The 2 callouts are Bell and Benja. So this is the deck that plays like Simba, Calhoun's, Doc, Mr. Smee, Alice, Bell, Benja, John Silver, Pete, Hiram, Pluto, Cogsworth. It then plays 7 songs. It plays 8 items and then the 3 locations. So for those that are listening, just the audio version, this is definitely more of the aggro blue steel version. But again, I guess the additions here is I don't think the initial version played 4 Fortispheres as well. I think they've actually added the 4 Fortispheres to add the 8 items to support Bell, which again, I would just question whether that's like worth it or not. I'm not sure. It might be. So yeah, what do we think about this aggro version, especially those that play more aggro like you, Justin?
Not sure about Benja being good enough, like doing a whole lot to really get you there on this, especially since you can't bounce it. They're just going to keep playing items that are just going to be like, okay, you got rid of my Fortisphere. I also got 2 popsicles down too. It seems odd. I feel like it was better before this build here. Like I said, I don't like to let the storm rage on. Not unless we turn out in like a really strong like aggro meta. And then the John Silver seems like I'm not sure what you're really trying to protect here. So I don't quite see the play lines on this one. What I would actually ask, I'd just put back up to the group. I think I have my own answer for this, but I'm sure plenty of people are wondering why the Pluto versus Bagheera.
Bagheera,
Bagheera.
I believe.
Okay. So I have my own. I'll put it back to you guys. Why would someone want to play Pluto over Bagheera?
I think it's just because of the ink cost, and strictly because of the ink cost. This is a deck where you're emptying your hand, you're playing dock, you're emptying your hand, you're playing dock, you're playing with a low number of cards throughout. So, like, the lines you're looking into turn 1 Bell, turn 2 Calhoun or Smee, turn 3 Alice, turn 4 John Silver to protect the Alice, right? Like, or the Pluto to protect the Alice, right? You've got 5 options there that say Alice doesn't die after you turn her sideways. Then you're looking at like a turn 5 lethal. Pluto can help get you there to protect the Alice specifically.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping that someone would key in on most, is like it follows right after Alice versus the Bagheera doesn't. And so I think you really need that in this deck. You're really looking for that play line a lot. And so that you can go Alice and then protect your bodyguard and go from there.
Yeah, and I did see a few people talk about that decision recently in some like online forums, and they intentionally took out Plutos and put Bagheeras in just to try it out. Because again, I think that's what we should be doing right now, is just trying stuff out. And they went back to it because it was like, hey, we'd rather have the 4-drop, and we'd also rather have the 5/5.
Mm-hmm.
I think like there's a difference between, because Bagheera is a 4/2, if I'm not mistaken.
4/3.
A 4/3. And I think having that 5 like trades with Shark, trades with like if they have a Tamatoa, or just some of these other characters like kills Maui. Like there's a few things that I just think like the 5 health. And yes, there's ways around this here where if they trade something else in and then something, but it's like they have to have that option and be able to be wanting to do that. I think the 5 health and the 4 drop or 4 cost is actually critical here. Andy, anything else here on this deck?
I know you touched on it. I think it's the willpower, the 5 that people like more than the Bagheera, than the grab your swords, conditional grab your swords. I think this deck seems very aggro, but I feel like it's more like, against control, I feel like it's more, you can be quick, but you also have to play around, like you have to protect your Alice. So I think it's a game of patience. So you want to like turn everything sideways when you gain 10, and then you have protection with Pluto, you have protection with John Silver or Cogsworth. That way they have more choices that they have to figure out depending on if they play against red decks. If you play against red decks and you want to be more conservative, you want to hold a dock, spread. And that's why I think they play manners. Against red decks, you want to be playing manners after red, be prepared. You just plop 2 of them down or 1 of them down with another character. It starts to gain lore really quickly.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Manor, because that was the card I was going to call out. Like, I think I know why it's in the deck, and it looks actually very similar to like the Ruby Amethyst decks, where you kind of have this like, I need to get to 10, and then I need to get to like 14, and then I either have 2 paths to win the rest of the game. Like, it feels like very much of a phased approach deck. But that was the other card. Like, how do we feel about McDuck Manor? John?
I love McDuck in here. So it's another way to take a distraction off of your Alice or your early questers. Again, with that same play line that you're going to try to have Belle into Smee into Alice, you can follow that up with the McDuck. And if you're sitting across from the table and you have Smee, Alice turned sideways and a duck on the table, you got to pick your poison. And there's usually not a good answer there.
Yeah, that is fair. I do feel like the locations do make people think. Coming off playing the Ruby Sapphire Shark deck from Ding, like sometimes you just play McDuck down and it's just like, I just want them to prioritize McDuck. And like, they're like, yeah, I have to. People make unrealistic decisions when you put down a 0-9 location that gains you 2. It's pretty crazy what people will trade into that versus trading into your characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a misplay card. Yeah, it's a great way to convince your opponent to misplay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I think that nails it. I think a lot of people get scared of that 2 lords remain to 4 and to 6, and like they don't realize the characters do the same thing and they can contest your board.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's jump over to the next deck we wanted to talk about, which is Oswald. This version was published, I believe, yesterday or a couple days ago by Wonderland, the winner of DLC Seattle. Better known for Emerald Steel, but now testing out this Oswald deck. I love Oswald so much. I really want this deck to work. I love everything about this version.
Honestly, I love this list. This is probably my favorite list that you've put up here.
But why is that? What is it about it? Like, what makes this list special outside of the Enchanted Tamatoa?
I mean, you have 13 cards in this list that say free on it.
That's fair. That's fair.
You can't underestimate that. And then you got one of the better draw engines in the game with Maurice's Workshop on top of Popsicle for Sphere. And you got ways to keep recurring that. You've got the early aggression with Bell, Smee. You got Pete when you need it. Like, this deck does all the things for free all the time.
Yeah, and for those listening to just audio only, I did want to go through this deck real quick. So we're playing 4 Oswalds, 4 Mr. Smee, 4 Bell, 4 Pete, 4 Hiram, 4 Scrooge McDuck, the new one that you get to play for free if you tap 4 items, and you get to look at the top 4 to find an item similar to Scuttle. We're also playing Ariel. We're playing 3 of the new Tamatoas, 3 of the old Tamatoas. We're playing Azurite Sea. We are playing Strength of Raging Fire, which I haven't actually seen in this type of version. We're playing Popsicle, Fortisphere, Imperial Bow, which I actually don't even know what Imperial Bow does. Andy, do you know what it does?
It gives, I forgot what is it, +2 Challenger and Evasive for the
Evasive's the
2 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2.
To only heroes, or can you choose any?
No, only
It's
heroes.
Only heroes. Okay. And I guess you have a bunch of heroes in this deck?
You do.
Yeah.
It's Scrooge, Ariel, Bell, and Oswald himself.
Oswald,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and so you're playing Imperial Bow, you're playing Fishbone Quill, Maurice's Workshop. And for those that don't know, Maurice's Workshop is a 3-drop uninkable item. And it says whenever you play another item, you may pay 1 to draw a card. This card is insane. I've loved this card for so long. It used to be in the Queen deck back in the day. I think it was actually the Queen deck that won a DLC in Europe. And then it plays 3 Lucky Dimes, which any deck that plays 3 to 4 Lucky Dimes is my type of deck. So John, I'm actually with you. I really like this deck. I want to play it. I think I look at decks like this and I'm like, this looks fun. But then I just really want to get behind the wheel on it. No pun intended.
Some of the wild lists I've been testing have been very close to this list. And it's remarkable how powerful this is. You can play it into something like a solid green steel discard. They discard you out. You're at 4 ink and you still end up winning the game.
Yeah. Justin, how much time have you spent fiddling with Oswald? Like, what's your take on this type of deck?
I've spent 0 time fiddling with Oswald besides the playing against it early last set where it like quickly died. My question for Oswald is, does this die and not get anywhere in a heavy Storm Rage On meta? So lots of Amber Steel. No, you don't think so, John?
No. So,
And then, sorry, go ahead.
I think people misplay Oswald. I think a lot of people just slam him on turn 2 and then start inking, or play him on turn 3 and get their 1 trigger. I think you play the game out and then you start like turn 5, turn 6, play the Oswald, ink twice. Play another Oswald, ink twice. Like, play him after your opponent's kind of gone through their removal on all your other characters.
That's actually a good point because it also thins your deck out, and your chances of hitting the item are higher, if they're still in your deck. So if you draw all your items, the chances are you won't draw as all your items in the first 4-5 turns, but you're gonna draw cards with Popsicle, Photosphere, and you're thinning your deck out so that you can hit that Lucky Dime, that Maurice, and getting value off of Oswald. I think that's the most important.
So that it's on 21 items here as a probability of hitting it type of deal, kind of like the whole Ariel having a certain number of songs. I wonder if you could afford 19 maybe instead of 21 and then put in one of my favorites, which is Calhoun. It just sounds really tasty to give Imperial Bow to your Calhoun and take out a genie in game 2 lore.
That does.
Yeah, that sounds good. Calhoun is your hero, right?
He is.
That would be a great play line. Yeah, I love that. I do think I just want to highlight the point, John, that you brought up, is that again, if you look at Oswald, Doc, Whole New World, right? Those are the 3 cards we're talking about. Like you actually play them around the same time in these decks. And I do agree with your point that like a lot of people slam Oswald early and like you actually end up misplaying it. Whereas if you play it on turn 5 or 6, it can actually end up being extremely powerful later in the game than playing it early. And again, same thing with Doc. You don't play Doc on turn 2 outside of maybe a very few circumstances. Justin, do you ever play Doc on turn? Is there a reason you play Doc on turn 2?
Yeah, when I don't have another 2-drop and I've got another one in my hand. Sometimes even if I've got only one, I usually probably have bounce in my hand. So
yeah,
I just try to get it out to another body, and then usually it just ends it right back in my hand. No one takes it out. No one usually can turn 2 anyways. So it's the only time though.
Especially if you're playing Amethyst, you can actually put it back in your hand. But again, typically you're not trying to play Doc on turn 2. I don't think you should play Oswald on turn 2. And again, you're not casting Whole New World any time before like turn 4 or 5 usually, unless you're playing Amber Steel and you have Queen shifts on 2, and then you play Whole New World. Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, I need to play this list, to be honest.
It's a lot of fun.
It looks fun. I think I'm going to go back to Justin's point about the number of items. 21 seems like a good number. I know you compared it to like Ariel, but with Ariel we look at the top 4, so it's a little bit higher chances of hitting the song. So I don't think we can reduce the number of items in this list just because it's just the top card of your deck. Correct, John?
Yeah, it's just the top card.
Yeah, so the math is different.
This is why the lists that I've been toying around with are between 25 and 26 usually. So like, yes, I'm close to this list, but I'm a few cards off because I do have more items. I do like Steel Chromicon quite a bit in this style list.
Yeah, I definitely there's some interesting things that should be played around with this list, but I do like it as a starting point. And now we've reviewed the first 3 lists of Sapphire Steel. So we looked at the Whole New World list, we looked at the kind of Kiwi, aggro, Doc build, Alice build. Now we've looked at the Oswald deck. Of these 3, which would you all prefer to play? John, you've already said this one, but I'll let you take another stab. Is it this one or another one?
For me as an individual, I would prefer this one. If you're a player that doesn't really want to think about deck building and wants to just jump in and play a good deck that's going to win you a lot of games, it's definitely the Kiwi version.
I'm actually not on the Kiwi version. Surprisingly, I'm actually interested in this or the Whole New World version. They seem more interesting. I feel like the other one's going to be more challenging to win off of. It might be because there's just a higher skill level required on the other one. I don't see it yet on the Kiwi deck.
Andy?
I'm going to opt out of all 3 of these decks.
Well, because there's a 4th version where you can just play Workshop and not play any of these bad cards. Right, Andy? Great transition. We didn't even plan it.
Didn't even plan it.
So, as someone who also doesn't like the first 3 versions, I like all 3 of the first versions, but I just prefer playing Workshop. over all of them. And I actually don't need any of these 3 cards in my deck. And there's a few other people that agree with this. There's a deck out there called Crab Rave by Riplungs, which also is a Sapphire Steel player that's been kind of playing around with this type of version. They're not playing as many workshops as I would play, but they even admitted in their last X feed that they would like to go to 2 or 3 workshops as well. But what do we think about this version? So for those listening to audio only, basically what it does is it goes back to more of a toolbox version, probably most similar to the Whole New World version, where you're playing Smee, you're playing Bell, you're playing Pete, Hiram, Cogsworth, New Tamatoa, Tinkerbell. So you're kind of running those lines. You're also playing Big Tamatoa. This one has Hades and Arthur, Fire the Cannons, Sail, Visions. Thank God. I love that card, Visions. That's actually the card we should have said. It's not even Workshop. It's actually Visions is the 4th best card. Then along came Zeus, Grab Your Swords, Popsicle, Fortisphere, Fishbone Quill, Workshop, and Lucky Dime. So really it's like a different type of build. You're playing kind of Visions over Whole New World, but it still plays very similar to them. But anything stick out to you in this version, John?
Yeah, there are 6 2-ofs, and there are 3 1-ofs. I don't like anything that is that inconsistent.
Even with Visions, though, have you played Visions of the Future? That card's so good.
I've played
Any
Vision.
card in your deck.
It's a wild card.
That is
like
true.
if you have
but
this
that
card
is-
in your deck, this card becomes that card. That's how that card reads.
That is only the top 5. You kind of need to pick a thought process and go with it. This thing is way too all over the place for me.
What I love about this deck is it has no wheel. I don't think you need wheel in Blue Steel. I think there's enough draw engine with Hiram, Visions. The new Baby Tamatoa gives you 2 draws with Popsicle and Fortisphere. So I feel like you won't be running out of steam, and you're still ramping, and you have more big bodies like Hades. I think we need more Hades in the list, 3 or 4, that can actually do something and deal with a threat.
The Blurple player would obviously be advocating for more Hades.
Always.
Thanks, Andy.
We have no removals in Blurple. Okay?
Yeah. It's like, tell me you're a Blurple player without telling me you're a Blurple player. And you're like, Hades, have you read that card?
Amazing.
That card's insane.
It is.
It's like, Justin, what about you? What stands out to you about this list? And how are you feeling about this list compared to some of the other ones you've seen tonight?
Fire the Cannons makes me want to barf. So that's just how I feel about that card. And how do you have Arthur in here without putting Calhoun? I'm just gonna keep plant Calhoun and
Tell me you're not a Steel player without saying Calhoun 4 times. Oh my goodness.
I would rather play Calhoun over Fire the Cannons because it actually can live. And then Fire the Cannons is just like a 1-for-1. Like, you're not doing anything. You're just killing maybe a Smee, but then they play another threat, and then you're still in the same place.
I think the card no one's talking about, which Lamb Chops would be kind of disappointed, is like, why are we playing Arthur without Pyros? Because that was Lamb Chops' specialty. He was like, Pyros, if I have Arthur, you're basically dead. So you have to play around it, but you can't. Because if I just play Arthur plus Pyros, like, geez.
Yeah.
I like the combo, but it's also a combo. Just give me cards that do stuff. I would want the Fire the Cannons to be like Let It Goes instead. Less on Inkables and removes a shark, removes a baby Tama, removes big threats.
Yeah. This deck does look like the Whole New World deck and the Kiwi deck got together. We shuffled 75 cards together and we dealt out 60.
Yep.
Yes, yeah, it really does.
Right? Like, and Calhoun didn't make the cut. I'm sorry, Justin.
No.
No, so-
Ha!
But it's
There's
like
only
the 2
4.
Alices, 2 Petes. It's like, just pick one. And probably
2
4
Petes?
Petes.
Yeah, 2 Cogsworth does
2
not feel good.
Cogsworths.
You don't need Cogsworth.
maybe we need to apologize to Riplungs because we were just tearing this up.
We are ripping him a new one.
Nice.
But it's really not him. What I do appreciate, so I do want to call this out. So Ripplings, no drama. But I do appreciate people putting out deck lists. Like these creators that are building decks, trying hard, Jax, Harlem, RMB, Wonderland, Ripplungs, like they're putting out decks that they know aren't good or they know they aren't perfect. And they're saying, hey, this is where I'm at. Can you give me feedback? So Ripplings, if you're listening to this, we're not trying to rip you a new one. We're really just trying to give feedback on this based on really a deep dive into the full Sapphire Steel deck, because there's so many options to build this set. And I think that's what's really cool. Someone says, oh, I'm playing Sapphire Steel. You're like,
which one?
This does feel like a mixed up situation, but maybe that's where we need to get to what I think is the best version, which is this version. And so since I run the run of show and I built the slides, I get to put my deck in there. And so this is where I'm at today. I'm leaning into the visions of the future, but kind of. I'm not even really leaning into it that much. I did jump to 3 workshops because workshop on 3, quill on 4 is like a beautiful play line that I think is undervalued. Andy's like, I don't know about that. The math isn't math.
You draw 2 cards, 2 cards?
You just draw 1 card. I just think the discipline of playing quill on 4 instead of on 3, I think is really important to this deck, because you want workshop down as soon as possible. And I think playing workshop on 3 is as soon as you can play it, and it changes the entire rest of the game. But anyways, for those listening on audio only, this list is basically like a little bit of a mashup, but it's more consistent in my opinion. So we're playing 4 Bells, 4 Peats, 4 Flavershams, 4 McDucks, 2 Ariels, 4 Tamatoas, the new Tamatoa, 4 Tinkerbells, and then basically like Sail, Zeus, Twin, Grab Your Swords, full item package with 3 Maurice's workshops.
I would flip those ratios.
I'm also playing 2 Twin Fires and 2 Grab Your Swords because I want 4 ofs, but I didn't want to play like different things. So I'm trying to think of like types of cards in this deck. And this is where I've landed so far. I really want more visions in this deck. But again, I think without maybe removing Tamatoa completely, the big Tamatoa, it would be tough to put additional visions into this deck. But yeah, what do you all think? You guys can rip me a new one, so I'll listen quietly. John?
I think we're missing Cogsworth.
Can you explain that, though?
Well, maybe you're doing something off. You trade your 3/3s in with resist 1 to other 3/3s, right? Our Scrooge now hits and now can survive 2 attacks where it could only survive 1 in the past, right? You're just simply trade better into the format. And there are a few decks out there that you drop 2 Cogsworths and you win the game. You don't have to do anything else. You literally just play the 2 Cogsworths and you win the game. As someone who played a lot of Amber Steel over the last few sets, I hate seeing 2 Cogsworths. It hurts my soul, and there's not much I can do about it. A deck that I'm looking at right here, if I'm on Amber Steel, I'm actually not worried about this list, and usually Blue Steel is a bad matchup.
So what would you recommend cutting to put Cogsworths into the...
I think we'd probably just go down on some of the numbers. I don't think 4 of the new crab is right. I think maybe you go down there. I don't think you need the Tipo, just the Sail. And then down 1 workshop. That would be where I would look, at least to start testing. Potentially the visions. I know you love visions, but you're playing a bunch of 4 ofs. So what are you digging for when you got all 4 ofs?
The card you need in that moment. It's like you're playing 6 of everything. And that's what I like to see.
That's true. I like the visions. I don't like the lack of Hades. I think Hades is a card that needs to be in here over Twin Fire.
We're banning the word Hades from this podcast.
What are you twin firing? We're going
to do a whole deck review about Blurple, and we're not allowed to mention the word Hades.
Well, the
deck is just purple.
Sorry, Andy. Where were you going with this?
So my question to you is, what do you use Twin Fire for?
So it's super helpful to clear a Smee plus something else. Where I found they quest a Smee, you can kill off Smee and then maybe like Broom, or you can kill off Smee and do something else in like the early game. Against the aggro decks too, like not the aggro decks, there are times when you play Tinkerbell and Tinkerbell like doesn't do enough. And then if you can come back and do like Tinkerbell plus Twin Fire, you can create scenarios where like you didn't have to leave damage on the board, but you were able to clear like a lot of their board. Whereas like playing, often I have to play Tinkerbell and then hope that I can play Grab Your Swords the next turn to like really reset the entire momentum of the game. And like Tinkerbell plus Twinfire can often like help solve for that. I'm not giving you enough specifics, but it's definitely been extremely impactful, which is why I actually increased. I was only playing one Twinfire for a while instead of a third Grab Your Swords. And I was like, I really need this card in my deck and I need more of. The other benefit is you can discard an item and you can get back that item later.
That's true. I just feel like you lose card advantage. It's like a 2-for-2, like a for 2 trade. Like it's an even trade, but you're down cards and they're just down the board, and they can just start replaying. Like I feel like you want to play things that can efficiently trade, and you keep your cards in your hand, and it's an uninkable. I don't want it.
I definitely hear you, but honestly, like 2-for-2 to reorient the board in Sapphire Steel can actually be like the end, like a completely game changing like momentum, because you don't have the ability to like clear things. If they go wide on you, like it's really, really tough.
Yeah, you depend on your Grab Your Sword and Tink, but that's why you play 4 Tinks.
Yeah, and
they're
you usually
really good
have
at
to play.
stalemating.
You usually have to play 2 cards to clear, like to reset the board. So you need like Tink plus something, or you need like Grab Your Swords plus Twinfire, which I've done as well, where you're like you sing Grab Your Swords, and then you need like Twinfire to clean up the rest of the board.
Okay.
Do you need 3 workshops here? I'm wondering, because if you go to 2, you still have 10/12 like draw engines in this. Because the Tamatoa 6 feels like a draw engine to me, and seems like a pretty decent one at that. Even if you don't even find your Hiram, but that's the question I pose right now. Is I know you like it. It's really juicy, and you can draw tons of cards. It's always fun, but does that win games?
Yeah, no, it's a great call out. I was playing 2 for a while, and then I wasn't drawing it enough. I think, honestly, in this version as is, if I wasn't going to put Cogsworth in, per John's recommendation, I may be able to fit Cogsworth too, because I'd probably go down a workshop, up a Visions, which again might be like a great trade. Yeah.
You kind of have even more draw than I had actually even originally recognized as well. You know what I would almost challenge you to do is create like a spreadsheet where just each turn you count how many cards you have in your hand and see where you start to get uncomfortable and where you don't have like enough cards, and that's where it's maybe perhaps triggering you to like, I need more than 2 cards in my hand. Because I know I felt like uncomfortable like that for a while playing Doc, when I'd have to like just trust that like I'm going to go to 0 cards and I'm going to hit something off the top. That's not the same thing you're doing here, right? But I wonder if you lean into workshop because you're used to having more cards in hand, and if you couldn't actually manage with fewer.
Yeah, no, it's a great call out. It's a great point. Any other feedback on this type of list, or even Sapphire and Steel in general? We'll do kind of a round robin on like, after talking about it for 60 minutes, where do you feel like you would lean? Where should we be testing? Where should our listeners be testing? Because again, right now is like the Wild West. You should be kind of like playing different play lines, playing different styles. Maybe you're a whole new world enthusiast and you should go out, force yourself to play the Kiwi version just to try it out and see how it feels. So let's start with you, John, and then we'll go to Andy, and then Justin. You can kind of give us the final say, and then I'll wrap us up for this evening.
I think we're to test, because most of these are pretty close to fleshed out lists. I think the place to test right now, if you don't have something built and you don't really like these lists, would be the Blue Song version. Bell enables a true Blue Song deck. Full 3 of Grab Your Swords, play a few Whole New Worlds, Strength, Storm, Zeus, and then you just play big stuff characters with that, right? Like you rely on a hard mulligan for Bell plus an item, like a Diablo shift line almost. You go down that route, and then you just build board state off of holding your opponent's board to 0. That's where I would start testing on this color combination, right, for the time being.
Yeah, I love that. Just really pushing yourself to lean into that. That's great advice, John. Andy?
I would probably lean towards more mid-range blue steel, kind of like the last list, but I would take out the bells just because, like John said, you want to utilize songs with that bell and lean into the songs, and that deck does not have any of the 3-cost songs. So I feel like bell can be more clunky and it could be a better card. So I would swap that card out and lean towards something mid-range in that no wheel that round.
Justin, what do you think? Have we converted you? Are you going to try Sapphire this next set?
Definitely going to try it out. Now, are we trying to convince others of what they should play here, or what I think I would want to try out?
I think one thing you would recommend or even feel like you want to dig further into. You know, we've really explored all the dimensions of Sapphire Steel. So the question is like, where do you go next? Where do you double click on? John was like, hey, let's double click on songs. And he's like, hey, maybe a mid-range version. I have my own thoughts here, but yeah, what are you thinking?
I think I might go back to the whole New World version. When I played it before, I felt like I was always either find dime or lose in the old version. And I don't know that you have to have dime to win as often, especially with the 6-drop Tamatoa. So it seems like there's more play lines that can present options to win than just needing to get super high in ink and be able to land that 8-cost Tamatoa. And where's Calhoun at?
He's on Calhoun's.
Calhoun and Zeus, or not Zeus, Hades, sorry, are definitely going to be the ones that we are talking a lot about in the comments. So
I'm just going to run a one of.
Just a one of, yeah, I love that. My thing is like the more I dig into Sapphire Steel, the more I want to go back and play Ruby Sapphire.
Red cards do it
I'm
better.
just like, I just start seeing things and I'm like, man, I just want like this and I want that. And I'm like, oh, Ruby Sapphire has all of those things. And so I think for me, the more I've dug into Sapphire Steel this deck, the more it's actually pushed me back to go test Ruby Sapphire more, to be honest. I'm not a huge Belle fan, as we've all talked about before. I just think she's overhyped, but we'll have to wait and see. March is coming up soon. There's a ton of tournaments. I'm very excited to see. We jump off with March 8th. There's a big tournament. The next weekend, there's a big tournament. The following weekend, there's a big tournament. And then all the way at the end of March, there's 2 big tournaments. And one of those actually happened to be here in Phoenix, Arizona. So if you're interested in some tournaments, definitely check out Phoenix, Arizona's, I think it's called State 48 Cup, where we're having a 5K and a 1K. Purple Shadow Gaming is partnering to make sure the event is a success in partnership with Ink Thieves and Top Cut Gaming. It's going to be incredible to see when we start seeing some tournament results. And until then, we'll just be testing on our favorite online platforms and in person with some proxies until we get to open some cards.
I'm really excited for the set, so I can't wait for next week to come.
I didn't realize it was next week. My calendar's off. This is great.
Yeah.
We're going to have some fun times. This set has the potential to actually shake up the very stale format that we've had for a while now.
Yeah, we have 1 week. By the time this comes out, we'll have 1 week left until the LGS releases. And we also need to get back in the studio and talk about a different deck. We've talked a lot about Sapphire Steel today. And so let us know in the comments, what decks do you want us to review? And maybe we'll get together next week and see if we can make it happen. John, Justin, Andy, it's always a pleasure to hang out with you. So thanks for being here and talking about Sapphire Steel. Have a good night, y'all.